chat and just, you know, FYI, I have the recording feature on if you did not hear that, so that people know we are recording for other CFOs that are unable to be in attendance today. But if you guys want to see those Webex survey results, I'd be happy to show you. If not, that's okay too. Just shoot me a message. Let me know what you think. But with no further ado, I think I'm going to introduce our guest speaker and get us rolling. I spoke with Tom Miller and Pat Conrad there with EOR. They came and spoke and presented at the MPCA office, and I thought the information was really interesting and it might be beneficial to our county feedlot officers. So I asked them if they'd be willing to come and talk at the Webex today and present about the Ag BMP Handbook. So Tom Miller is with us today, and I'm going to hand it over to him, and we're just going to get started. If you guys have questions, Tom, do you want them to jump in or to chat or to wait till the end? Which would you prefer?
Either way is fine with me, really. Maybe chat, and then we can open it up for more discussion at the end, I think.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. So just chat me your questions, and at the end, you know, I'll try to get all those out, and then we can open up for a little bit more discussion. So I'm going to pass the presenter ball down to Tom, and you're going to see your screen transition. And Tom's going to take over and talk to us a little bit about the Ag BMP Handbook. So it's all yours.
All right. Hopefully everybody can see my desktop.
Yep.
Ooh, pretty.
Great. Does that look right there, Sam?
Yeah, looks good. Looks good.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Sam. We were able to present in the handbook to the Brainerd office, PCA, and I think it went pretty well. There are some specific things in this handbook that I think will be particularly interesting to county feedlot officers and anybody who deals with the feedlots in Minnesota. But I think what I'm going to do mostly today is give you a pretty good general overview of the handbook itself, what went into it, the history behind it, and then we'll actually we'll take a walk through the handbook and click through it a little bit so you can see what's going on. And I'd say it's a 40-minute presentation, but I've given this presentation 6 or 7 times, and it's always varied between 20 minutes and 60 minutes, so it's not super consistent. So so we'll go through the handbook history, and I do have a little video to go with it, and then we'll talk about what's inside the handbook and how can you use the handbook, which is not really always how we intended that people would be using the handbook, but I think there's some specific things for you. And I've got 2 videos in here, and they're somewhat general agricultural BMP videos, but it helps breaking up me just talking the whole time, and I think it really helps get the juices flowing and people thinking about these things and kind of frames the whole discussion of conservation in Minnesota. So this handbook was originally conceived in 1985 by John Brock and others from Department of Agriculture, NRCS, a number of different agencies got together and put together a handbook called Agriculture and Water Quality. And it was a very good handbook. And then for quite a while, there wasn't a whole lot done with this document. It was somewhat obscure until 2009, legacy funding happened with the state passed, and then in 2011, a competitive RFP process through the Department of Agriculture, a very general RFP process. Essentially, they said, tell us something about agriculture and water quality in Minnesota, and we came back with the idea of, well, let's redo this handbook that was created so long ago that a lot has changed in the last 30 years. So we were funded to take that on. We also worked with a a great technical advisory committee with Department of Ag, PCA, NRCS, and some other agency people to help guide the process. So I thought I'd just take a look back to when the handbook was created and look at a few of the differences that have taken place between then and now. So, you know, back in 1985, a gallon of gas cost about $1. Nowadays, well, gas is considerably more expensive.
All right, I'm going to multitask.
Back in 1985, I was just a pudgy little kid growing up on the banks of the Mississippi River trying to catch some carp. And now I spend most of my time out on Little Lake Osakis trying to teach my sons about water resources. But if you can see that picture closely, my youngest son, Michael, and you see the amount of liquid coming out of his mouth, he already knows a whole lot about water resources. And of course, down to business, 1985, there's the original Agriculture and Water Quality Handbook. And here's the cover of the new handbook, which hopefully many of you have downloaded already. There's a link in the agenda if you haven't done that. So I wanted to show a short 5-minute video just to sort of frame the history of agricultural BMPs and conservation practices. And it's just a quick little 5-minute video. Sam, can you let me know that the volume is coming across okay?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Is devoted to agriculture. We're very dependent as a society worldwide on the food that's produced.
Is that working, Sam?
In the river basin.
A tad louder would be helpful.
Livestock generated more than $13 billion in 2009.
There you go.
Agriculture is Minnesota's second largest industry and accounts for 1/5 of our jobs. The Minnesota River Basin up into the Red River Valley, there's what I would call the modern day fertile crescent, where we've got a combination of the right soils and climate and rainfall.
Prime agricultural soil with not a lot of stones. It also holds water. It's a place of lake clay and silt, so you have to tile it to farm it.
Much of our drainage systems that have been installed are nothing more than stormwater removal systems, very similar to what most cities have. It's just a way of moving water off the landscape to make the land tillable.
But the faster flow of water from tile drainage has made farming in floodplains risky. Don Helfer used to farm the river bottoms near Montevideo. He experienced firsthand what happens when tiling increases on land upstream.
In 52, Benson area, a lot of the farms were half sloughs. That's when they started building ditches and draining all that, and then all that water comes down to that. That's why it floods every year. It got so that it didn't crop anymore. This year was all farmland.
So Don Helverson decided to quit farming the floodplain and put his land in a conservation program.
Make it a wetlands. This way, when the flood water settles in here and saves it from going into the river or down to the Mississippi. Now, see what it looks like. It's a sanctuary for birds and raising fish, deer, or turkeys, or pheasants, or ducks, or if you can hunt it all, you should be able to get something. That's worth a lot to me for the river, for my grandchildren and my neighbors.
In the years since he quit farming the floodplain, Helverson and his neighbors have continued working to improve water quality in the river. In 1992, Minnesota Governor Arne Carlson created a Citizens Advisory Committee to find ways to make the Minnesota River fishable and swimmable.
The Citizens Advisory Committee, painstakingly over the course of 2 years, put together a very comprehensive set of recommendations for the state of Minnesota to follow what we called almost the 10 Commandments of cleaning up the Minnesota River. First of them was the river needed to have its natural floodplain restored because there was really no reason to be farming in that floodplain. This is floodland. It's not cropland. So 4 of us from the Citizens Advisory Committee flew out to Washington, D.C.
And the availability of the federal dollars to focus on the watershed and try to make a major impact in improving water quality and habitat in that watershed, what was available through this Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program.
About a month later, the federal government put about $167 million up on the table as a little incentive for the state of Minnesota to get this cropped floodland out of production.
But the state needed about $80 million in matching funds to get the federal money.
Governor Carlson and his staff put this at the top of their agenda.
And we marched a lot of farmers up to the Capitol saying, we want this. They don't want to be in the floodplain farming.
Minnesota Farmers Union, the Farm Bureau, corn growers, soybean growers, pork producers, I mean, all of these groups in the end were supportive. The rare sort of once in a lifetime.
We're talking about 100,000 acres of floodland along the Minnesota River and its tributaries, which was taken out of production in the course of less than 2 years.
I think it was both citizens coming together with government, and it formed a partnership that I think will have a lasting impact on Minnesota.
5 to 10 years after that CREP program was in place, you could visibly see the difference in the Minnesota River. Many of the fish species that are sensitive to those high rates of sediment have returned. A lot of it had to do with CREP. CREP was huge.
Your committee was the first to break the hostility, if you will, between urban and non-urban on the environmental issues. And I think through your committee, which was representative of the totality of the state and the coming together of the various agencies, I think it started to build bridges. And I think those bridges are frankly permanent.
A great ending to a super project now that is being replicated across the United States. If we did a nice job on that, but we got a lot of work to do yet.
All right. Can you hear me now, Sam?
Yep.
Okay, great. So that was just a little video that I like with Ron Sherry in it that kind of frames the whole discussion for us, I think. And that's H2O videos. If you haven't seen any of H2O videos, they have a whole number of series and videos about clean water and agriculture specific. So it's worth checking out. So jumping right into the handbook. So going into this, we really wanted to start documenting water quality in agriculture in Minnesota, and we were looking at it as a tool for research primarily to guide what the Department of Agriculture was going to fund as far as research goes into the future. But what we found is that it really morphed into this sort of something for everybody communication, planning, and research tool. But another thing to get clear is that the handbook is not policy. This is, even though on the cover it uses a fairly energized political term of best management practice, it is not actually policy or law. When we refer to BMP throughout the handbook, we're using BMP and conservation practice interchangeably. It's also not a ranking of the best BMP, and this came out of the great differences on landscape and different farming practices throughout the state. We're so different from southeast to south central to northwest that there wasn't really a ranking of the best BMP. The handbook's not necessarily concerned with yield or specific economic analysis, although we do provide some cost information within each chapter. So inside the handbook, one thing that we're really proud of with the handbook is it is the first state agricultural handbook that's based on research, and definitely the strongest focus was on local research and regional research for the upper Midwest. There's a number of other handbooks out there, manuals for different states, and none of them were based strictly on research. And we're very fortunate in Minnesota that we have enough research being done and that has been done to create a handbook like this. So we go through all of the conservation programs, pollutants of concerns, and then really where the meat of the handbook is in 32 BMP chapters. And we'll take a look at those a little more closely. So the bulk of it's 160 pages, but there's a 422-item bibliography, which contains a lot of great research. Like I said, I think that handbook has a little bit of something for everybody in it, particularly from a communication standpoint. In each one of the chapters that we've put together, one of our big focus was on the pollutant removal that you get with installation of one of those practices, and projects that have in the past monitored installation of these practices. That was a really kind of our big focus on water quality pollutant removals. But we also thought that it'd be important to include some design tips, and really tips is the important word here. We didn't recreate the field office technical guide here. What we have done is we have linked, hyperlinked each of the chapters to the relevant field office technical guide for Minnesota. And then operation and maintenance is usually based primarily on the POTOG. The cost information, if we had cost information from specific projects that were included in the handbook in each chapter, then we included that cost information, or else we included equip values, and along with all the deficiencies that might come with those. I really think it was important to include that cost information from somebody on the outside looking in who didn't really have any idea of the order of magnitude some of these things cost. You can sort of get a feeling for that from the equip dollars, at least on a lot of things. And the references and links, and when I walk through a chapter, we'll actually click on some of those and see what we can pull up. We really focused on the most pearly white literature we could get, peer-reviewed journal articles. We wanted this thing to be rock solid, based in science that applies to this area. And then from there, we went down the line to less pearly white sources, but also there's a lot of stuff that if you really just stick to your guns and go with peer-reviewed research articles, you end up leaving out a lot of good information, and we didn't want to go too far that direction either. This is the general layout of the handbook. There's 4 chapters and then appendices, and I'll walk through it a little bit in a minute, so I don't want to dwell on this too much. The organization of the handbook is, and this is the BMP Chapters, so the organization is set up based on the Mississippi River Basin Healthy Watershed Initiative, and they've laid things out as avoiding, controlling, and trapping. And this is really a useful way to lay things out. And it gives you a roadmap for a number of different things. Using this type of a layout, for one, gives you a layout of cost effectiveness in that it's almost always easier to avoid letting a pollutant get into your water than it is to control or later trap it. It also allows you to look at these things from the actual mechanism that is making this a good best management practice. And that's something that's maybe more important to me. I have a watershed modeling background and a water quality modeling background, so I'm always interested in the actual physical process that creates the water quality improvement. And I think this is kind of a good roadmap for that, and I've used it in some of my modeling exercises. So just a quick walk through one of the chapters. So this is cover crops, and you'll see one thing that we've included in all the chapters is a color picture right off the bat, because there's a lot of the people that have been, well, handling this handbook at the time are not involved in conservation directly. We've been getting a lot of people that have been picking this up are legislature, people in the legislature, people in the House, people in different committees, and they need the background information. We need to lay the groundwork for them. And so we do that by providing a definition and introduction, getting through the technical advisory committee, just getting through this definition of each practice was quite a process, and that the NRCS has a definition, the Department of Ag has a definition, and there's many other definitions out there. But in general, we went with the Department of Agriculture definition because they provided the money for the project. And then you'll see the water quality and other benefits is really where that literature review comes in. The key design information, not reproducing the field office technical guide, and then cost information where applicable for cover crops. We didn't have any other costs from any of our projects, so we went with the equip payment schedule from 2011. Where there was really something that we came across that we thought was important and would really help inform the most number of people, we reproduced it as is. For instance, this is a planting guide for cover crop uses, and I thought this was a very useful resource, and that this is something that I found important from a modeling aspect to know when at what time parameters would change in my watershed models. But it's also important for outreach, for bringing to a producer who is interested in implementing cover crops, and it's also good from a perspective of a layperson picking it up and saying, well, what are these cover crops? I don't get when they go in if we have such a short growing season, and it kind of answers a lot of those questions right off the bat. So there's a number of those resources throughout the handbook that have just been reproduced. Research gaps, it was another big consideration. The Department of Ag really wanted to know what has been researched and what has not been researched, and I'll take you to a summary table of that when we actually look into the chapters. The appendices are very important. Appendix A is really just a summary of the local sources. Appendix B when we were going through this literature review, there are tons of sources from around the country, throughout the world, on agricultural BMP performance. And as we found out as we were going through this, there are a lot of research gaps in Minnesota, upper Midwest. So we wanted to include these national sources, but we included them in an appendix just because we wanted the main body of this to be such a Minnesota-based handbook. And then the bibliography, which is, again, over 400 entries, but it has good notes in here. It's either written in plain English, so if you find a reference and you want to find out more information, you can go to here, and it provides sort of a lay description of what this project actually was and its relative importance. So as I mentioned, we went into this with some preconceived ideas about what we were going to accomplish and what people were going to use this for, and some of that's starting to come true, and some of it in more ways than we thought, whereas other things really aren't being used. In the research and demonstration projects, we're definitely seeing people start using it, and the planning and communication, which has absolutely been the biggest portion of the handbook that people have been using. But we haven't really seen it much in the pollutant removals. This is me when my counterpart, Jay Michaels, walks into my office the day before Clean Water Fund grant applications are due, and so I thought that I'd be using this a lot for estimating pollutant removals, which you can. I mean, you can go to each of these chapters and find great information on the different pollutant removals that you get, and then use that in your Bowser calculator or other model. But really what we found is that people kind of already have their own ways that they do these things, and the amount of data we've included on pollutant removals isn't really enough to get people to say, I'm going to go with the numbers from this handbook instead of the thing I'm used to doing and the thing that's agency approved, for that matter. So that one hasn't really happened quite as much as I thought it was going to be. One thing we have seen it used for are research and demonstration projects. especially for some of these newer conservation practices that either have an interim NRCS code, or they don't have an NRCS code at all, and they're very much in the pilot study research kind of phase, such as wood chip bioreactors and controlled drainage, which I'm not sure if they're out of their interim phase yet. But we've seen this, the design components being used as people go out and put these on the landscape. I've got one more video, but I think I'm going to skip this video, the second video here. It showed some of the installation of some of that controlled drainage management, the controlled drainage stuff, and the wood chip bioreactors. If you're interested in seeing that, if you Google H2O videos, you'll be able to find it on their website. And it's a very good video showing installation and a lot of the researchers talking about the results that they're getting from it. So I sort of mentioned this. TMDL and RAP studies, this is really where my involvement was from almost a selfish standpoint. I wanted to write this handbook and get it out there, is that as we started to write these implementation plans and RAP studies for the PCA, I was finding that a lot of them were untargeted, and you could really tell that there was a disconnect between the conservation practices and the impairment itself. So generally when we go through these TMDL projects, we identify the pollutants, we figure out how to reduce the pollutants, we implement conservation, and then everybody goes swimming. But throughout those different phases, there's a ton of communication that goes on. And so it usually starts with the consultants and counties or state people, and then it gets into project management, project managers, citizen groups, and as soon as you figure out how to reduce your pollutants, then you're going out on the landscape and getting these things on the ground, and you just have so many different groups involved by this point, and this is kind of almost the minimum of the number of groups you have involved with varying backgrounds, that it's been a really good communication tool to use for these. So I think that's the best way it's been used. But other things that have been happening with this handbook that we had no idea would be involved with, the Computational Hydraulics Institute out of Guelph, Canada, some of the premier watershed modelers in the world, have been starting to implement portions of this handbook into their code for modeling of agricultural BMPs. Ohio State University is planning on creating some fact sheets based on the chapter, but that's kind of in its infancy, so maybe that's a stay tuned there. And then designing new BMPs, the wood chip bioreactors primarily. So it's really kind of a broad sweep of conservation practices, but there are a number of chapters that are probably most interesting to CFOs, and that's livestock exclusion and fencing, nutrient management, which includes manure management, waste storage facility, feedlot runoff control and filter strips, and clean runoff diversion. And as you can kind of see from this list, we've lumped some of the NRCS practices together in the same chapter, where a lot of the research overlapped. So, well, maybe this is a good opportunity to tell you that to go and download the handbook, you can either click on that link that Sam sent out on the meeting agenda. You can go to the EOR website, or you can just Google Ag BMP Minnesota, and it's one of the first two options that comes up. So it's pretty easy to get to. So I'll just give a quick tour of the handbook, and then a quick tour of one of the BMP chapters, and then we'll open it up for questions. So when you download it, this is the first page that will come up. It's a pretty manageable download. It's about 5 megs, so it only takes a minute or so. And then you get through sort of the basic stuff, a lot of the partners that were involved on it. And then the table of contents. As you can see, the first 3 chapters of the handbook really are very short and very introductory chapters, and then the different agricultural BMPs are really the bulk of this handbook. And so we start with our avoiding, and then our controlling practices, and then our trapping practices, and then we have our appendices. So if I just give you a little bit of the background in these introductory chapters, a pretty concise conversation about water quality in agricultural watersheds. And really the bulk of this is going through each of the pollutants, sediment in this case, nutrients, pesticides, bacteria, and then also discussing biotic impairments, and really giving a background on the number of these things, any types of time lag that would be involved in conservation before you would see a change in the water body. And then the agricultural BMP inventory just talks about the types of information that went into the handbook, some of the ongoing research that's happening, some of the more important water quality studies that have happened. So what I want to do is just walk you through one of the chapters, feedlot runoff control. Is one of the BMP chapters, and they're generally between 4 and 10 pages long. But I think this is something that that the people on this conference call could really take out, print out this chapter and bring it with you to help facilitate discussion with people that you meet that maybe haven't thought about this, thought about some of these issues. Certainly not as much as each of you has. So what you can do is, from this first page, you'll see that we've included 2 different practices in this one chapter about feedlot runoff control, and that's a wastewater filter strip and the clean runoff water diversion. So what you can do is you can open up to this page, and then if you want further information about the design of these practices, you can click on the number next to the practice name, and that'll actually bring up the NRCS Conservation Practice Standard. So that's sort of your first step to getting more information, a pretty easy way to get there. And you can do the same with clean runoff water diversion. Of course, these links may not be good forever, but many of them seem intact still. So here's to hoping that lasts for quite a bit longer. And then you'll see under the water quality category a great study of filter strips in central Minnesota. And then again, for feedlot wastewater filter strips, we provided costs, and these are the equipped payment schedule. One thing that we'd love to update, we've created this thing as a living document, and this is really version 1.0, and we expect there to be a lot more versions after this. And one of those things that we'd really love to pin down are some of the costs that are coming out of these actual projects and implementing them. I think that's one thing that is really hard for a lot of people to get a handle on who don't have direct experience with it. So that's one of the items that we'll be updating in the future. And then research gaps is another thing I wanted to touch on within this chapter. And it says, little research was found that pertains specifically to clean water runoff diversions. For wastewater filter strips, the coliform reduction efficiency varies case by case, and the reason for the variabilities is not clear. Additional research may be necessary to discover the source of variability and improve the performance of filter strips. And so it gives kind of a narrative description to help guide the Department of Agriculture and where they might want to put resources in the future. The links section, every chapter involves a fairly extensive links section where you'll see the NRCS codes again. And then you'll also see hyperlinks to the Conservation Funding Guide. So somebody could take this and get all of the Department of Ag's information as well as just linked by it. Also, other important links that may be more applicable to the producer itself have been included as well. So I guess let's see if what else I had here. We went through a little tour of the handbook. I encourage you to go and at least download the handbook and click around in it and see what there is of interest to you specifically, and that may help you out with your day-to-day work, especially when it comes to the communication aspects of it. All of these people were very helpful in putting this handbook together. I added Sam to that list for inviting me to talk today. Thank you very much. And with that, I guess maybe I'll open it up to some discussion or questions.
Is there anybody out there that has any first impressions that you guys would like to share of this, or thoughts about how you would use it in your county or your work?
Hey, this is Tracy Giannaculo from Wright County. Yeah, I love the color. It's beautiful, especially the change from the first one. One of the things, was wondering if we download this to our computer, you were able to go from the chapter and then it jumped you right to the chapter. Will that work on our computers also, or is that something in your system?
Nope, that's built into this. It's a PDF, so as long as you have a PDF reader, you should be able to use those hyperlinks within the document. When it went outside, when I clicked on it and it opened up the NRCS standards, that is going out to the NRCS website and grabbing that. So you'll need an internet connection for that to work.
Okay.
And we just got Doug Boss from Rock County says that was a great resource for many different applications. And I agree. I think it's hard to pinpoint one thing that it would be good for. But what I really like was if you go back to that feedlot runoff control page in the handbook. And would you mind doing that, Tom? Would you mind?
I can get us there.
Looking back. Yeah, go back up like 2 pages down one. That it's got the design, implementation, considerations, things to think about, and then go down one more page. It's got the operation and maintenance considerations. I really like that, especially if you're giving this to a producer for ideas, because a lot of times we can't design the fix. We've got some county feedlot officers that are just the CFO, and some that work as SWCD and NRCS. They have different hats that they flip back and forth. And for those of us that don't do the design, this kind of stuff is awesome because we can hand it to a producer and give them some ideas without having to design the idea. It's kind of how I was looking at it first. Does anybody else kind of have thoughts on that, or how that might be interesting or beneficial for out in the field talking to producers about this kind of stuff?
This is Tracy again. I think
Go ahead, Tracy.
It would be real helpful. I don't do the SWCD NRCS side, so being able to know what some of the maybe difficulties of the operation and maintenance, up front. Yeah, after 12 years, I've kind of learned much of this, but especially as a newer feedlot person, I could see, oh, well, yeah, just put in a diversion. Well, yeah, stuff, sedimentation builds up, and okay, maybe stuff, it becomes a maintenance issue. You can tell them that, but sometimes if they see it in writing, it's a lot better.
Yeah, one of the other questions was, is 70/20 referenced anywhere in the document for a producer that just picked this up or was given to it as a resource, as far as just rule guidance for some of the stuff?
Oh, that's a good point. The 70/20 are the Minnesota feedlot rules?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
which governs a lot of things like, I think you've got the, what we would call a liquid manure storage area. It has design standards that, you know, as far as the practice standard, but it has ones that the state requires as well for rural.
Well, let's have a look at, because if I had included it, it would have been in the waste storage facility, I imagine.
So, I mean, there'd probably be applications in other areas for feedlot runoff and some of these other things too, but.
So there's some discussion of it under the waste storage facility.
Okay.
Let's see if I have a link to it as well.
There you go. I think that brings us to our
so that'll
homepage.
take you to the feedlot
Okay.
rules.
Good.
And yeah, and so that reiterates kind of the power of this, is that it's a great jumping off point for if you want information on something, you can go to that chapter, and if it's not in the chapter, it'll generally link you to it.
Okay. Another question that came in is, who is the intended user for this manual? Those who are going to enroll in conservation programs, or those who want to voluntarily implement BMPs? I think the answer would be yes. Am I right, Tom?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Sam. We went in with a set group of users, and by the time we got done listing all the people that we wanted to be able to use portions of this, it pretty much included everybody in the state. So I think people that want to implement the conservation programs, and there's links to bring you to that the conservation funding guide, which I think is a very useful resource as well, especially for the producers.
Another question came in on the chat that for BMPs, example, a cover crop, it gives the equipped dollar amount per acre. Does it also give the dollar amount cap? Or does it have a link somewhere that will give the cap?
That's a good question. Have a look.
Okay. While you're looking at, I'll just read another comment. Being newer to the feedlot program, this is a gal that I think will be a good resource reference in dealing with a non-compliant site. I think that's a good point. Oh, there you go. So it has $40 per acre.
So yeah, so we did include payment caps on each of those, and I think these are pretty standard between chapters when we were including equip costs. That they're all set up in this manner, so they should all have payment caps on them. Okay.
Very, very good. Are there any other questions out there? Anybody would like to ask Tom, or comments that you'd like to throw out, potential uses? Okay. I'm not hearing any, but you all have the link to the handbook. Just want to again thank Tom for your time and for coming in and sharing this information with us. It's very, very helpful. And it's good to know when these resources are there, and I like the research part of it so that we can, you know, because I don't always have time to sit and you know, I like the filtership research. If I ever did get some spare moments, I would like to go look at that and kind of look and see what some of the behind-the-scenes stuff is. So,
yeah,
thank you.
And if anybody wants to, has questions afterwards, they can send me an email or give me a call. You can find me on the website, or it's tmiller@eorinc.com.
Okay, tmiller at, what was it, EOR?
EORINC.com. It's Emmons and Olivier Resources Incorporated.
Okay. Well, I will send that out to the group here, and really appreciate the work that you've done on this and being willing to share it with us today.
Well, thank
Very
you, Sam.
cool.
Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. I'm just going to steal the control back from you here, and we will jump back to my desktop. And Tom, you're willing to stay, or if you need to go to other things too, we just really appreciate your presentation today.
Thanks, Sam.
All right. Thank you. Our agenda is pretty much done. The only other thing I did have on there was any Delta questions that might have arisen in the last couple of days, or any comments, or pardon me, not comments, but frequently asked questions. Anybody wants to throw it out there for Delta stuff or recent updates with Delta things. Anybody got any questions or concerns they want to bring up today? Okay. Not really hearing anything. Feel free to chat me if you want to say something or interrupt. That's all right too. The Webex survey, I can't quite get it up, having some password issues with accessing it today. But basically what everybody said, I think, is we had over 95% of our county feedlot officers tell us that that you guys want the Webex back. So we're bringing it back. And please feel free to email me ideas or stuff like this too. If you go somewhere and you hear something and you think it's really beneficial, or that it might be a good resource, or it's news that you think staff or county feedlot officers should hear, I find most of these people are really willing to present on the Webex because it's so easy. It's not travel for them, it's not hard, and it's easier to get outside speakers too. Do you guys have any feedback about outside speakers? Do you like them? Did you like today bringing in some of this other stuff as a potential training opportunity for Webexes? Any comments or chats? You guys are a quiet bunch today, man. Okay, I think I am going to turn it over to Steve for some comments about Delta, just to clarify a few things, I think. So go ahead, Steve, whenever you're ready.
Hi, Sam and everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There are a number of changes coming to Delta. Some of them you will already see. Most notably on the registration screen, there's been a clarification, and I will be sending out an email to everybody to all the CFOs and all the MPCA staff. But in the registration screen, there was some wording changes. Instead of liquid basin, it now says liquid manure storage areas. It also clarifies the distance to holding areas for manure storage and for holding areas itself, for feedlots themselves. We also made an additional change in the inspection screen to add an emergency response type. One of the things in the inspections, in the inspection checklist, when you do the drop-down menu, you will see that the answers are now compliant, non-compliant, no, and not applicable and not inspected. And I'll be sending out a cheat sheet on how to use those particular answers for question 19. The DWISMA piece is in process as far as being updated so that we have the updated DWISMAs, and it looks like we will be able to do that on a nightly cycle. So as new DWISMAs are added, that table will also be added. Again, more to come. Read the emails that I send out as far as what's happening with Delta. So thanks, Sam.
Did you want me to demonstrate or show any changes that have been made, or just wait for the emails to come out?
No, I think I'll try and incorporate some screenshots into the emails so that people see what's going on.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody have questions for Steve about that? Okay, not hearing any. Today is a little bit of a quicker WebEx, but I think it was good. I've got some positive comments from folks here about the speaker and some other ideas for some future ones. So with no further ado, I think we're done. This last call? Yeah, go ahead.
This is Jen from Stearns County. we had a team meeting. I was trying to type, but it wasn't coming out fast enough. But we had a team meeting, I don't know, a week or so ago, and it was actually kind of brought up that you may not actually need to load the checklist, like the inspection checklist for all types of inspections. And so I was just going to ask for clarification on that if you knew. I was going to try and catch Steve, but like I said, I wasn't typing fast enough.
I think Steve's still there. Say that again. Are you talking about?
There was, yeah, for like when we go out on inspections, I take my inspection checklist with me when I go, or fill it out or whatever, and it was brought up that we don't need to do the checklist on like all the construction compliance or complaints, but it's only on the compliance, I think, was brought up.
Correct.
Okay, so if we would go...
Inspection checklist, and Steve or anybody other PCA staff out there, feel free to correct me. The inspection checklist is intended for a compliance inspection.
Okay, so like when we would do an inspection, we don't necessarily have to do an inspection, like complete... Okay, I'm not saying this the way it's in my head, but...
It's okay. If it's a compliance inspection, use the checklist. If it's construction, you're typically not using the checklist unless you're doing a compliance inspection at the same time. You're looking at new construction. You could be doing that. If it's assistance, you do not use the checklist. If you're just going out there to help somebody fill out a permit application and you're not looking at the farm, you know, that's an assistance.
Okay, so but then when we come in to Delta, like, and then we fill out the inspection report, we still need to always fill out that.
No.
No.
Go ahead.
Okay.
So, no.
Okay.
For compliance inspections, you would add the drop-down menu.
Yep. Yep.
And load the checklist, okay?
Okay.
As Sam identified for assistance inspections, just put your assistance comments and things in the notes section.
Okay.
For emergency response, you would do the same.
Okay.
For level 2s and level 3s, you would load those specific checklists.
Okay.
And if you're doing a construction inspection that has an open lot where you've observed, you know, one of those questions or one of those items being done in question 19.
Yeah.
Like if it would be about reducing the lot size, reducing the herd size, rain gutters, clean water diversions, those types of things. You would load that base checklist and answer only the questions in question 19.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah. So what I'm understanding is that for the only time that I need to go in here and do what you're doing right now and load this checklist, for the most part, is for the compliance inspections. Everything else, I would get to that where you did and just put notes. Unless it pertains to, it was a non-compliant site and they've have pertinent information in the 19.1 and beyond.
Correct. Or Land Act 2.
Well, yeah,
Land Act 2, Land Act 3.
Yep. Okay. So I don't need, pretty much I don't need to load it for the construction or for the complaints or assistance. Okay. It was just came up and I was surprised, so I wanted clarification. So.
No, that's fine. That's the kind of stuff where we want people to ask. And if you have the question, there might be somebody else out there that has the same question. So this is a good place to do that. This is kind of a forum opportunity for you guys to bring questions up like that. So that's good.
All right, thanks.
All right. Go ahead. Oh, I thought someone was going to say something else. All right. Well, it's 10:58. Without any other questions, no one else is chatting anything or saying anything, I think we're going to end our February Webex, and we will see you guys on the Webex world in April. Thank you.